Right. All right, thanks everybody for joining us at the City of Courtenay for our December 9th, 2020 special meeting that basically to replace the meeting that we were supposed to have on Monday. My apologies for missing that. We'd just like to first start by acknowledging that we are meeting, gathering, and Zooming on the traditional unceded territories of the Comox First Nation. And just our preamble, due to the coronavirus COVID-19 emergency, the City of Courtenay, with the authority of Ministerial Order M192, Local Government Meetings and Bylaw Process, Order Number 3, implemented changes to our open council meetings. In the interest of public health and safety, and in accordance with Section 3.1 of Ministerial Order Number 3, M192, in-person attendance by members of the public at council meetings will not be permitted until further notice. Council meetings have been are presided over by the mayor or acting mayor with electronic participation by council and staff via live web streaming. And with that, we have lots of minutes to adopt.
Mayor, would you accept the motion to receive all the minutes?
Absolutely.
Second. So move.
Excellent. And Councillor Healing, you had a couple of corrections?
Those have been made alerted to the Mr. Mayor. There was a missing name in the minutes of the 7th of November, and I believe that's been corrected.
Okay, excellent.
Sorry, the 16th of November.
Okay, all right. Thanks very much. All right, and I think we've got that. And being that they are minutes, I'll just assume that they are unanimously received unless somebody waves their hands fiercely in opposition. I did not have any introductions of late items, so we'll move on to staff reports and presentations, and starting first with the 5th Street Bridge Rehabilitation, AAP, if somebody would like to move that.
You want the resolution, Mr. Mayor?
If you're comfortable putting the resolution forward, absolutely.
Yes, I'll move that based on the December 7th, 2020 staff report, 5th Street Bridge Rehabilitation Alternative Approval Process results. Council approve option 1 and proceed with final reading and adoption of the 5th Street Bridge Rehabilitation Loan Authorization Bylaw number 2978, 2020.
Second that.
Excellent. And with that, I'll pass it over to Mr. Krishner.
Thank you, Mayor. I will pass this over to Wendy Sarista, our corporate officer, to summarize the report and take any questions that council may have.
Thank you. From the CEO to Mayor and Council, the purpose of this report is to provide the results of the alternative approval process for authorize the 5th Street Bridge Rehabilitation Loan Bylaw 2978 to borrow $3.5 million to rehabilitate the bridge. As outlined in the previous meeting through the briefing note, we had a very robust communication schedule to provide public notice for eligible electors to submit their comments via the elector response form. And there were concerns about how we could facilitate that process with the COVID-19 restrictions. So our communications plan was outlined in the staff report, which included, in addition to the statutory advertising, additional media release, ads in the newspaper, weekly radio announcements, and also utilizing the city's website, project webpage, and AAP site, and also using facility overhead monitors in the recreation facilities that were open to the public. So this is to confirm the final result that there were 52 elector response forms received by the November 16th submission deadline. So that means that council is in a position to proceed with adopting the bylaw without having to proceed with assent voting, or otherwise known as a referendum. And on the agenda this evening is the final adoption of the bylaw. Once the bylaw has been adopted, it is sent to the Inspector of Municipalities for the final certificate of approval, We have to satisfy a 1-month quashing period before that transpires. When we receive the certificate of approval, which is anticipated, I would say, late January, February, then the inspector of municipalities must then, we must provide a security issuing resolution that has to be forwarded to the Comox Valley Regional District to be included in the next Regional District Security Issuing Bylaw that will go through further adoption at the regional level. And I'll take any questions if council has any.
Great, and I do see that Councillor Hillian has a question.
Not a question, Mr. Mayor, but I just want to thank staff for all the work involved in this process. Council will note that we did have a delegation from one citizen prior to this process indicating some concern about how widespread the notifications were going to be. And I think as Mr. Richta has outlined for us, a lot of effort was made to make sure that all citizens were aware of their right to present approval forms and including daily radio ads, I note in the report. And the number of electors that did exercise that right was certainly well below the threshold that would require us to hold a referendum. And therefore, I think we can comfortably go ahead with approving this bylaw to move forward with this much needed project. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Councillor Hillian. And yeah, I think, given the fact that we are finding new ways to make sure that we're upholding the statutory duties of the corporation, I think, again, kudos to staff for making sure that we can move forward on these important projects. So I don't see any further questions or comments, and the motion's been moved and seconded. So I'll just poll council, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
Favor.
And Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCollum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
I'm in favor.
And I'm in favor as well. So excellent. And again, thanks to staff for that. Next, we have there's the release of covenant for secondary suite.
I'll move receipt on this one, if that's okay, Mayor.
Okay.
Second.
All right, that's been first and seconded, and I'll pass it over to Mr. Kushner again.
Thank you, Mayor. With this, I'll pass it to Ian Buck, our Director of Development Services, to summarize the report and take any questions that council may have.
Thanks very much through the CAO to Mayor and Council. So this application or request appeared before you on November 16th. And just as a quick refresher, the property in question has a covenant that's registered on it, restricting the use to a single family dwelling only. The properties in this subdivision were zoned in 2010 to allow for secondary suites. However, at the time of subdivision final approval, the city's practice in 2011 was to require payment of development cost charges for the secondary suites, whether or not they were going to be constructed. Applicants at that time were provided the option of registering a covenant like this one, restricting the use, and then only pay the single family development cost charges. There's 18 lots in the subdivision, 16 of them have been built on, and there's 2 vacant ones that are now owned by properties persons other than the original developer. One of those individuals has requested a release of this covenant in order that they can construct a house with a secondary suite for a family member. In order to do that, it requires a council resolution. As outlined in the November 16th report, we suggested that we consult with the neighborhood who has the same covenant registered on it. We did that, and the results are in the report. We had 5 pieces of correspondence. 3 of them were opposed to release. One of them just had general questions about secondary suites, which staff responded to, and there was no follow-up. And another letter that was concerned with parking and access through the property, but no specific detail on support or not support. So council is in the position where they can release this covenant if they desire, but there's certainly no requirement one way or the other. So entirely a council decision. I'll take any questions.
Excellent. And are there any questions from council? Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks to staff for the report. I'm just curious about if you could clarify for me, are we talking about simply relaxing the covenant or removing the covenant on the one property requested? And it has no impact on the covenants on the other properties in the subdivision?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and do we have any options, as we've done in some situations, to amend the covenant such that it would require home ownership to accompany the provision for secondary suite, the home occupancy by the owner?
We could certainly do that if that's council's desire. Would take a bit of time in order to pull the documents together. The real, correct way to do it would be through a housing agreement, but we can work through those details. So if council's desires to release it on that condition, we can proceed on that basis.
Thanks very much.
Excellent. And Councillor Theos.
Thank you. I appreciate it. May I ask, you were saying the practice it was in 2011 when this was initiated. That policy of possibly asking for a covenant in future buildings, does that still exist? Is that something we may revisit in the past, or have we abandoned that?
Yeah, so the current development cost charge bylaw exempts secondary suites from DCCs. So if you were to be in a situation today like they were in 2011, it wouldn't be an issue. The zoning would be in place to allow suites at the time of building permit or subdivision, sorry, you would just pay the single family rate.
Thank you. And if I may have a quick follow-up, please. In estimations, when the developer was being asked with the option of doing this or not, and of course then being able to save funds by not having this particular piece in place and therefore resulting in the covenant, do you have an idea of the kind of savings per unit that the developer in that case would have saved?
Yeah, good question. I don't have that number right in front of me, but as a rough estimate, I would say in the neighborhood of $1,000 or less, a couple hundred to 1,000.
Thank you very much, Ian.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So I certainly understand some of the concerns outlined in the letters in opposition to this removal of the covenant. The main one seems to be traffic in the neighborhood and more activity in general. Although I think that certainly with just this one removing, having the covenant removed, it probably wouldn't be a big, it wouldn't have a big effect on the neighborhood. I do see though that if everyone did it, it certainly would have a large effect. Although the way things are going with development in Courtenay, I think I would have to support the removal of this covenant and allow the secondary suite to be built. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that for now. Thanks.
Excellent. And I don't see any further questions or comments. So with that, this is just a motion for receipt. I'll assume that that's unanimously received unless somebody waves their hands in furious opposition. And with that, if somebody would like to move the motion.
I'm happy to do it. I'm just looking for it. Here it is. So that based on the December 7th, 2020 staff report, release of covenant restricting secondary suite 2977 Cascara Crescent, council approve option 1 and direct staff to release the covenant CA 2451158 from lot 10, district lot 236, Comox district plan EPP 17584.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments before we move to vote? Seeing none, I'll poll council, starting with Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Sorry, I do have a question.
Sorry, Councillor Healing. Yeah, over to you, Councillor Healing.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to ask planning staff, what sort of input we're receiving in the official community plan with regards to a citywide zoning in relation to secondary suites, and also the issue of owner occupancy that has been raised from time to time.
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's come up even yesterday. We had an affordable housing workshop on the new policy that we're developing. And one of the tools obviously in there is to encourage infill development. And a big way to do that is what we call sometimes gentle infill, so through secondary suites and carriage houses. There hasn't been a lot of specific discussion on that end regarding owner occupancy. Oftentimes, as council will be aware, when we do have applications, individual ones to rezone, that's a concern in the neighborhood, is sometimes people will say they're okay if the owner does occupy it, so you don't end up with two rentals, have a bit more control over, or the hope is there'd then be a bit more control over the property. There was a walkabout in East Courtenay that focused a little bit on secondary suites. I think some of the comments there did allude to the to having the owner occupy it, but certainly it wasn't widespread opposition in that case.
Thank you. And the other question I have is what staff feels is a reasonable expectation for traffic in the neighborhood. I can't remember exactly, but my recollection is that there was some concern that people in the neighborhood already have several cars that end up parked on the street, and the concern alluded to by Councillor Frisch that secondary suites, if there's more of them, that would have more cars parking on the street. Are we assuming that with the relaxing of this covenant, that this individual will build a house with a suite and provide enough off-street parking to satisfy that concern?
Yes, we do require under our current zoning bylaw 2 parking stalls for the principal residence and 1 extra one for the secondary suite. And since it's new construction, even if it was a rezoning of an existing house, that's something that's a condition of the building permit. So in this case, there'd be a minimum requirement of 3 spaces on site. That, having said that, doesn't mean people won't park on the street, but that's how we manage it as at a staff level.
Thanks very much. And on that basis, I'm certainly prepared to support the resolution.
Excellent. And Councillor Theos.
Appreciate it. Yeah, the purchase of these properties was made with clarity that this covenant was in place. And the people surrounding the area were also made aware when they purchased, potentially having in mind that this property was there, that there was a covenant in place on this property. I feel that and from my point of view, relaxing this covenant would be unfair. I understand that there's somebody that wants to have a family member come in, but again, this is an area where we have hundreds of rental and non-rental units going in a very small area, radius of this particular place over the last year or two and moving into the next few years. I feel that there is excessive traffic in that area already, and the fact that the people may have been living there, doing their research and homework, saying this is an area where we want to be, especially because there's a covenant protecting from excess growth in that spot. That to me is even a stronger position than someone that's in a residential area that says that having a secondary suite would be beneficial to them without a previous covenant on those particular homes. So this to me is a very different situation, and I cannot support relaxing this covenant.
Okay. And Councillor McCollum.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I have a couple questions about covenants in general in the city. One of the comments from one of the nearby residents that was opposed to changing the covenant mentioned that they're alluded to other covenants in the city of that had similar restrictions that wouldn't be changed. And it made me wonder, are there many areas in Courtenay that have a similar limitation, or is this fairly unique to this crescent?
Good question. I haven't, and it's something through, through OCP or future zoning update that I think we'll have to do a lot of investigation on, is figure out exactly how many properties this would impact. I do suspect, based on past practice, there's probably a few of them out there. And we do see, and council will remember, in upcoming public hearings, we'll deal with one associated with zoning on Arden Road, but we do occasionally see requests to amend covenants that were put on in the past. And then we, approach them uniquely at each time, try to figure out why it was put on and whether it's relevant to release.
Yeah, that kind of leads well into my next question as to whether or not covenants are meant to be a more permanent restriction on a lot or in a subdivision than say our zoning policy. Is the practice that's meant to be more fixed? Because I know that we don't really have a set process for releasing them, or is it case by case?
Yeah, it's a bit of both, to be honest. The intent is that it's a contract, basically, put in place for whatever the restriction is. But there are instances where they are, they're put on in unique circumstances that may no longer be relevant based on today's conditions. And that's where we try and assess how does, if changing the covenant is warranted, or if the original conditions are significant enough that they need to be upheld.
Right. So I guess the key question is what the original conditions were that led to the restriction. Yeah. Okay. That's helpful. And just one last question: how this relates to the OCP? Were we to do a blanket zoning change, throughout the city to allow secondary suites, these areas with these type of covenants would be exempt or wouldn't qualify for those secondary suites unless the covenants were removed. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Excellent. And Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make some comments that after looking at the feedback from the residents, I think it's understandable when there's change for people to be a little apprehensive about it. That there were 3 letters out of the 16 houses, which is not a high level of concern, but understandable. And they seem to focus primarily on parking and on traffic. And I think Councillor Hillian's question sort of largely resolved the parking question. Will be adequate on-site parking. And in terms of traffic, this is it's a family member who will be living in this suite, and probably in the other houses there are extended family members who live in houses but not necessarily in formalized suites. And given that it's a cul-de-sac, I think it's unlikely to be impacted by surrounding developments. So we're looking at a family member living in a house and a person will have off-street parking. And that seems like a fairly reasonable set of circumstances to be lifting the covenant. So while I do take the concerns of those 3 individuals, I think that the overall set of arrangements we're considering here are reasonable, and I'll be voting to support lifting the covenant from this property. Thanks.
Thanks for that. And Councillor Morin.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, it's my understanding, and maybe Mr. Buck can just clarify that this area was in fact allowed secondary suites, and the reason for the covenant actually came from the developer in response to the DCC's issue, and not from the residents saying we don't want secondary suites. So I mean, like I say, some of those residents probably would have been around at that time when actually secondary suites were allowed. Is that, do I have that correct?
Yeah, sort of. It's actually before any of the residents moved in, the covenant would have been placed on the property. Okay. So those people in this second phase, the 16 occupied dwellings, would have bought with the covenant in place.
Okay. All right, but it would have been, yeah, okay, I see what you're saying, but it was in fact zoned for secondary suites prior to that area. I thought
Yes,
that you
so
said that council had approved the rezoning to allow prior to the covenant.
that's correct. So when it was still a parent parcel, we call it, so a larger piece of land, prior to the subdivision, they rezoned with the intent, I assume with the intent of doing suites. And then it was at the time of subdivision, so when they started creating the individual parcels, they decided to put this restriction on. So a bit of an odd situation, zone to allow for suites and then restrict it by covenant is, it's not typical.
Right, and however, the covenant was developer driven, was it not?
That's
It
correct.
wasn't okay, thank you.
All right, I don't see any further questions or comments. I think we've had a pretty fulsome discussion. It is obviously a unique situation, and I really appreciate staff for giving us a little bit of the background information. So, with that, we'll go into a vote. So I'll start with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor?
Councillor Frisch,
In favor?
Councillor Hillian,
In favor.
Councillor McCollum,
In favor.
Councillor Morin,
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
I'm opposed.
And I am in favor. So thanks for that great discussion. And next we have on there a structural change.
Happy to move this one if no one else is chomping at the bit. Based on the December 7th, 2020 staff report, structural change to liquor license application for Gladstone Brewing Company at 244 4th Street. Council approve option 1 as follows. The Council of the City of Courtenay recommends the LCRB approve the application for Gladstone Brewing Company structural change to a liquor license. Council's comments on the prescribed considerations are as follows. If the amendment application is approved, it would not result in an increase of noise in the area. If the application is approved, it would not negatively impact the community based on the submissions received from the public. In order to gather the views of residents, the City of Courtenay posted a notice on the city's website outlining the application. Additionally, the RCMP was contacted for comment and indicated having no concerns. And in order to ensure the safety of occupants of the expanded area, this approval is conditional on the applicant removing all canopies and roof structures that have been constructed without permits, and that occupancy permits are granted prior to any use of the licensed areas.
Second.
Excellent, thanks very much. And I'll pass it over to Mr. Kushner.
Thank you, Mayor. I will pass this to Matthew Fitzgerald, our Manager of Development Planning, to summarize the report and take any questions that council may have.
Thank you. Through CAO to the Mayor and Council. So this is a referral from the LCRB concerning an application to change a liquor license for Gladstone Brewing. If you look at your report, figure 1 shows the changes to the brewery, which have both been proposed and occurred over the last few years since the brewery was opened. The changes to the liquor license proposed to permanently incorporate the 3 patio areas into the liquor license area, increase the occupancy limit for the 3 patio areas from 118 people to 261, increase the interior occupancy limit from 30 to 49, and increase the total occupancy inside and outside for the brewery from currently 148 to 310 people. The city did post notice of this proposal on the city website requesting public comments on the proposal. 1 comment was received, which is attached to the staff report and is supportive of the changes. Staff are supportive of this application and are recommending that the council responds to the referral recommending approval. With that, I'll take any questions.
Excellent. And Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So I understand there was some issue with some of the temporary structures that were up here, and I don't know if that's why the item D is included, but is staff able to update us on sort of what's going on with those temporary structures that were put up. I know some of them were put up without permits, which is obviously an issue, and what we're doing to hopefully help them make those outdoor spaces for people.
Question. So as you alluded to, the current structures on the property were erected without permits. The applicant has applied for a permit to construct a permanent covered patio area, and so that's in process with our building department now. And once any of the issues are resolved, permit will be issued. And construct the new steel covered patio area.
Okay, thanks very much.
And Councillor Theos.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, no, I am very impressed that this applicant has adapted to today's conditions in a way that to me, being in the service industry for many years, looks like an effective way of dealing with today's food and beverage climate. So I just give credit that this applicant has found a way to try to keep his business vibrant, and I'm very happy to see that. So thank you very much.
Excellent. And Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll support this resolution without any problem, but I do have a curiosity I wonder if staff can help with. Patio Area 2, which is, I believe is included in this application, as far as I know, is shared with the cafe in the same building. And I'm just wondering how the extension of the liquor license into that area impacts the use of that area by cafe patrons, as appears to take place on a regular basis.
Thanks for the question. So we actually did ask that question to the LCRB, and they indicated that the patio area can continue to be shared by patrons of the cafe, as well as people from the brewery. So the shared arrangements for the patio could be continued, but that's really up to the property owner if he wants to allow the cafe to continue using it, or if he wants to use it exclusively for the brewery.
Thanks very much. Appreciate that.
Excellent. And looks like I don't see any further questions or comments. So with that, I'll poll council for their vote, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor?
Councillor Frisch.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCollum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
I'm in favor.
And I'm in favor as well. Excellent. And next we have the uncollectible property taxes.
I'll move, Mayor, that with regards to the property identified in the staff report, that council approve option 1 and adopt the write-off of uncollectible property taxes in the amount of $408.81 for the year 2018 as outlined in Appendix 1 of this report. That council direct the Financial Services Department to apply to the minister under Section 7081 of the Local Government Act to manage and dispose of such assets. That once the ministerial approval is received, all outstanding amounts from other taxing authorities be deducted from their 2018 tax requisition, and each of these taxing authorities be advised. And that the mayor and council be authorized to execute all documents related to this matter. Now, just as I make that motion, Mr. Mayor, I'm curious about the wording that the mayor and council be authorized to execute all documents. Is it not normally the mayor and executive officer?
I'll defer to Mr. Richta, I think, to clarify.
Thank you, Mayor, for the question, and I might leverage Jennifer Nelson, the financial officer, on any requirements on her end. But yes, that is accurate that the corporate officer has signing authority to do so. but it may have to have consent of council before we can proceed. And that could be what's being achieved in the resolution today. Jennifer, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
I don't actually have anything to add unless Renata, our manager of finance, she's the one that's been working to prepare this report with our tax clerk, Robin. My understanding is we just need a resolution from mayor and council to proceed, and then we can, once we get, we send the report with the resolution that it's been authorized to the minister and we gain approval, that's enough for us to proceed with the write-off. So that should do.
Well, subject to further staff advice, I'm going to make the wording of the last clause, number 4, that the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to execute all documents related to this matter.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor McCollum, for seconding that. And I'll pass it over to Mr. Kushner.
Thank you, Mayor. And I will pass it over to Jennifer Nelson, our Director of Financial Services, who will introduce her staff, who will then summarize the report and take any questions that council may have.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to introduce Renata Vika. She's our Manager of Finance, and she's going to summarize this report and take any questions that council may have.
Thank you. Through the CEO to Mayor and Council. The purpose of this report is to request that Council seek approval from the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing to write off 2018 uncollectible property taxes on a mobile trailer that was burned down in 2018. This is a housekeeping item for the Financial Services Department. This is the first time that I am aware of where this type of approval will be requested by the City of Courtenay from the Ministry. And thus, I would like to acknowledge our finance staff member, Robin Tate, and thank her for researching this issue and writing the staff report. So city finance staff has attempted to collect the 2018 property taxes of about $409 through a regular collection process. When the mobile home was destroyed by fire, we advised the homeowner to contact BC Assessment to request an adjustment to the assessed value of the building through a supplementary. However, the homeowner did not follow through the process with BC Assessment and did not pay the outstanding property taxes. And thus, we would like to obtain the ministry approval to adjust our taxes receivable amount by the $409. And with that, I will leave it open for questions.
So thanks very much for the report. And Councillor Frisch.
Thanks, Mayor. So my understanding from the report is that the amount is uncollectible sort of by law, or are you actually saying that we're choosing not to collect it? Maybe you could just explain why we would choose not to continue trying to collect this money and instead write it off, because we don't do that with a lot of other collectible taxes, right? We would actually go through a different process to get the money by selling the properties or whatnot.
Thank you for the question. So this is a very rare situation. Really, there is only a couple of instances where the city can seek this type of approval from the ministry, and one of them is damage to the property through flood or fire. Another one would be when a mobile trailer is actually moved from one parcel of land to another. In this case, what happened was the trailer burned down beginning of November, and then BC Assessment inactivated the roll, so effectively made the property or the mobile home disappear off of assessment roll for 2019 and for 2020 assessment roll. So we can't levy taxes on it because there is nothing on it. And the assessment was only related to the mobile home. We certainly tried, originally when we levied the property taxes middle of May of 2018. We sent an arrears letter August 24th. Then we sent another letter on November 1st. The trailer burned down on November 5th. And then we still tried sending another letter in March of 2019, again to try to collect the money, and the homeowner chose not to pay. So at this point, in order to adjust our property tax account to reflect what actually is collectible, we would like to seek that ministry approval.
Yeah, so I'm sorry if I'm maybe just not understanding, but would it be technically unfair to collect the $400 in tax, or is it just a matter of it's being too challenging, or that there's no mechanism to actually follow through and levy the property anymore?
At this point, we basically exhausted everything that we could do through regular collection process to collect this money. And since the property was destroyed by fire, this is one of the reasons where municipality can apply to the minister for write-off of this property tax amount.
Okay, thank you very much.
Excellent, thanks for that. And I don't see any further questions or comments at this point, so I'll pull council for their vote, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor?
Councillor Frisch?
In favor.
Councillor Hillian?
In favor.
Councillor McCullum?
In favor.
Councillor Morin?
In favor.
Councillor Theos?
I'm in favor.
And I'm in favor as well. So thanks for that housekeeping item. Next, we have an update for the 6th Street multi-use active transportation bridge.
I'll move receipt on that, Mayor.
Second.
All right, and I'll pass it over to Mr. Kushner again.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll pass it over to Chris Davidson, our interim director of engineering services, to introduce the presenter and summarize the report and take any questions that council may have.
Thank you. Through the CAO to Mayor and Council, staff are happy to present the detailed options analysis for the 6th Street Bridge project. Staff have advanced the designs for the network arch and cable stayed bridge options and further refined the project schedule and estimated costs. To continue to progress the project, staff would now need direction on which bridge style and which bridge width to proceed with into detailed design. Here to present tonight, we have our design consultant, Sean Valdovinos from V&M Structural Design. So without any further ado, I'll hand it over to Sean.
Thank you, Chris. And I'm just going to pull up the presentation we have prepared. A second. For some reason. There we go.
Are you sharing your desktop?
I am. Sorry, I just had a couple prompts there. And it should be up now.
Here it comes. You betcha. We can see it good now.
All right, perfect. Sorry about that. And let me actually hide these so you can hopefully see everything. Yeah, this is an exciting moment in the study. We've studied quite a bit, and we're excited to come back and present. So yeah, to summarize, in February 3rd, 2020, Council provided the following direction to staff. The Council affirmed the priority construction of the 6th Street multi-use pedestrian bike bridge project and direct staff to include the 6th Street multi-use pedestrian bike bridge project on the list of Council priorities. So from there, the V+M was selected to help with the multi-use study. And in this slide, it's just providing some of the background. So in January, the presentation to Council was a previous feasibility study that had 4 options that we then developed further in this study. The 6th Street multi-use plan was recently completed, and it was included as one of the items in the playbook, the Downtown Courtenay playbook, providing a nice multi-use connection through Sims Millennium Park. So taking all of that and wanting to connect the Courtenay Riverway Trail to the other side of the river, we continued the study of the Bowstring Bridge, the Bailey Bridge, Network Arch Bridge, and Cable Stayed Bridge options. So these were all presented in the previous feasibility study, and we took it to a deeper level to understand the aesthetics, the geometrics, and the cost of each. So the Bowstring and the Bailey Bridge pictured here, these are renderings of what those concepts would look like with a 4-meter wide bridge deck. On the left is the Bowstring, and on the right is the Bailey Bridge. We discussed in the report some of the typical benefits that you have with like a prefabricated bridge systems. And one of the constraints that really faces the 6th Street project is limited construction staging area. So we have the home builders site, Home Hardware, and we have a parking lot next to us, but that's all private. The public right-of-way is quite limited. And you can see a shed here. It opens up into the terminus of 6th Street. So there's really not a lot of room to assemble either of these bridge systems. And so with the discussions that we had earlier, the poor aesthetics, the need to increase the vertical profile and steepen the ramps on both of these was another significant drawback due to the concerns on the winter time and just ADA. So these two options tended to be ruled out. We did study them to this level, and then we carried the network arch and the cable stay bridge options to a higher level of design. The network arch has a lot of aesthetic appeal, and it's rendered here. You can see the arches would rise over the river in a nice way. So having a very high aesthetic signature structure type of quality. The one issue is, again, if you think about lifting an arch, it wants to be supported at its ends. So typically they're assembled on the side of where they're going to be placed and lifted into position with large cranes. So Sims Millennium Park has some restrictions on the size of equipment that we could get to that side of the river, and then the removal of trees to make room for that type of construction. So we had to look at even offsite and assembly and floating it down the river, or building temporary false work to support the bridge so you can build it in place. So you almost build a cable stayed bridge system to then build the arch system. And that's done in certain circumstances, and that seemed like a reasonable way to approach this, and that's kind of how we priced it, so that you didn't need all of the staging area. And that tends to lead to this option being the most expensive. So just talking about the cable stayed bridge, we studied the configuration. It has back spans with it. So there is more bridge, as you can see here. The back span would be the portion running from 6th Street. And then you have the main span. And so the towers support the main span with cables, and those are tied down to foundations that anchor the back span. So even with that, though, there's a benefit of the constructability, because you can assemble the back span quite easily, and then you incrementally build the bridge out, and you can do that from both sides until they meet, and then you can put what we're proposing, a concrete deck. The other benefit of this is that it's adaptable to a wider width too. The cable stay bridge system can be 4 meters, or it could be 5 or 6, which is another part of the consideration. And it also has that aesthetic appeal of having tall elements that can act as wayfinding. So all of that together kind of went into that rising to the top, and we'll get into the evaluation criteria. But I want to talk about the connections first. So both the cable stayed and the network arch use a similar style of connection up 6th Street. So as you go from the intersection of Anderton up the hill to connect to the Riverway Trail, what we showed as kind of a reference concept was just a concrete barrier and then some painted lines to just help with the channelization of the existing roadway. It would remove the parking, but the benefit here is that you can come off of the bridge, across the crosswalk, and then users could take the sidewalk if you're a pedestrian, or you could have a simple bikeway in the road. And that was shown as 3 meters. So combined, we have a reasonable width that matches, it's compatible with the main bridge. We also just showed a raised crosswalk for safety, just at the intersection here, with traffic moving in and out. That would just help, well, it would help visually and also help slow traffic without creating too much disruption for any trailers. Going to the Sims Millennium Park side, We have a lot of existing trails that tend to intersect in a variety of different locations. And so what we try to do is square up the existing trail into our mainline pathway. And then we introduced a roundabout. And this is a bike roundabout. It's a bit of a innovative solution for something like this, where you have the traffic coming in multiple directions. You may have bikes that want to continue on towards the park along this trail, or you come out towards the parking lot. And depending on how the future configuration of the bike cycling infrastructure would be on this side of the river, we felt that this was actually a pretty good way to help slow traffic, but also function in a way that is effective. And then the neat thing about it is the space in the middle could be used as an opportunity to feature Indigenous artwork. So there's already a similar enlarged area, and we were just bumping that out a bit. The one thing I just want to note is there's that culvert, which is limiting some of the width beyond here. So we just studied up to this point and we didn't look beyond. So that was kind of the extent of the project. The evaluation criteria is shown here. We have the vertical columns for the prefabricated bowstring, Bailey Bridge, network arch, and cable stayed. And we've shown different evaluation criteria for these options, scoring a total of 100 points. So the Bailey Bridge was 48, or sorry, the bowstring was 48, the Bailey 43, the network arch 72, and the cable stayed 81. So the cable stayed tended to rise to the top as far as the evaluation criteria. Cost estimates for the baseline 4-meter option. When you look at all the general buckets of work, so you have the general activities, the foundations, approaches, superstructure, all the way down to some allowances here. That comes out to $4.4 million estimate for this Class C estimate. And then the optional items, so above that baseline option, it's more of a shopping list. So, higher quality railing, extra lighting, aesthetic lighting on the bridge, public art installation, just some holding quantities for those totals. And that could be, any of those items could be selected just like a shopping list. And then we also looked at the premium for going to 5 meters, and the 5 meters and 6 meters. So the upper portion of the table is what the premium of increasing to 5 meters and then 6 meters. And that does add cost. And I should just say that it tends to be pretty proportional in the structural sense, because you increase the demand, which you also increase the quantities, and all of that tends to drive in a more or less linear way. So it tends to be proportional. And that's the sum for 4 meters, or 5 meters, and then going up to 6. And just to touch on the schedule, I know that there are some grant opportunities that currently exist with the COVID funding. And so, Chris, you could talk to this maybe better, but I'll just run through it a little bit. The grant opportunities, public engagement, running out through 2023. And construction window, one thing that we did find is there's an eagle nest in the park that does potentially affect construction windows. And so there might be a need to try to time the construction so that you, as far as the noise, tends to be mitigated. And then that tends to summarize the presentation, and I'll hand it back to Chris for questions.
Thank you very much, Sean. Appreciate that. And with that, we'll open it up to any questions.
Excellent. And we can start with Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the report. Certainly super interesting and very digestible, so I appreciate that. I had a question about the recommended width at 4 meters. Just maybe a sense of where staff are at on suggesting 4 instead of maybe spending more on 5 or 6. What are your thoughts on that in general?
Oh, excellent question. Recommendation for 4 came basically from being in compliance with active transportation guidelines as put out by Ministry of Transportation. I believe it was just last year. So that's what we based that recommendation on. If there was an appetite to go larger, yeah, staff are more than happy to deliver. It would be an increase in cost. Going wider would open up options such as pathway delineation for bikeways and walkways. But based on active transportation guidelines, staff are recommending a 4-meter width at this point in time.
Yeah, it's kind of like when I go shopping for something and I find out that the cost to get the better one's considerably more, and that's how I'm feeling right now. $800,000 seems like a good chunk, but as you outlined in the presentation, it's kind of commensurate with exactly with the extra width. It seems like there's no savings to put on 2 meters is what it looks like. It's just double the price, right? Yeah, and so about those extras, some of them seem like they might be worth considering right away, but can they also be done later, like the art installation or the lighting, or obviously the railing seems like you'd have to do it right away, but are a lot of those things maybe things we could look at down the line if we wanted?
Yes, another great question. Absolutely. So the main things we're looking for direction on tonight is the style of bridge and the width of the bridge. With that, we have enough information to proceed into detailed design. These other items can be added on. We wouldn't want to wait too late, especially for, as you've identified, the railings and maybe some of the lightings items. But some of this stuff could even be added on after the project is completed. So there's not such a rush on the optional items.
Yeah, so I don't know what my exact thoughts are on the width, but I do wonder if we'll regret a narrower bridge because I think down the line with people starting to enjoy it, you could end up having a lot of people hanging out on the bridge, and I wonder how that would affect actually traveling on the bridge. And also point out that with demand management, the more accommodating you make a particular form of transportation, the more likely it is to be used. So I'll just leave that as my thoughts for now. Thanks.
Thanks for that. And maybe as a follow-up question, and I'm just looking, like I see that there's an increased cost in for the width for construction. Should we assume that maintenance O&M stuff should be basically, fairly similar, even though it's a little bit wider?
I think that's a safe assumption. Yes, I wouldn't say it would be quite as proportional, but there would be an increased amount of maintenance required just due to the increase in size. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And Councillor McCollum.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks again for this presentation. It's great to see this coming along and getting more detailed information to us. With regards to the width of the bridge, I'm just trying to visualize my experience on like a multi-use path bridge, and the only kind of regular experience I can draw on is the Galloping Goose trail that goes over the gorge. I used to commute on it. It's a pretty busy pathway. You wouldn't know offhand if that is a 4 or 5 meter wide bridge, would you?
Ooh, Sean, do you know the answer to that one?
So the Galloping Goose does vary on its length. We actually designed a bridge, Admiral Way in Mackenzie, and it was 4 meters wide. And that one actually is a new bridge. So that's down by Victoria though. So it does vary. But in that case, they had explored a wider bridge and they settled on 4 just from a cost perspective. But I don't know all the different widths. I think it does vary up and down.
Yeah, I can kind of recall what traveling along there is, and I do recall that the width going across the gorge, it's actually a wooden bridge across there, or at least it used to be. I think it's maybe changed since, but the highway crossing is quite narrow, and I remember that the gorge was quite comfortable to travel across, and it was very busy with both bikes and pedestrians, and I'm hoping that was 4 meters, because if so, I think we can go a long time before we have too many people traveling across it. But I'm sure I could probably do a little bit of looking maybe online and find out. So yeah, I'm leaning towards a 4-meter bridge, hoping that my assumptions are correct there. I have a couple of just minor questions. Looking at that slide regarding the connectivity and the two-way pathway coming off the bridge on the west side, I imagine that a good portion of the traffic coming off of the bridge will be heading, well, at least the cycling traffic will be heading up 6th Street and through downtown. But it wasn't clear to me how that traffic flow would come across 6th Street here, especially if there's a bit of a concrete barrier to kind of direct cycling traffic onto the Riverway Trail. And I'm not totally understanding that.
That's a great question. We'd included the concrete barriers for now, just for safety for cars coming around the corner. To facilitate traffic continuing up the hill, I think you'd really need some more cycling infrastructure heading up 6th Street and possibly beyond the intersection. The scope of this project for the time being, we understood to be just the areas immediately adjacent to the bridge. So for that reason, we've limited it to this. We believe there would be some more probably infrastructure requirements to facilitate going right up the hill. So we didn't want to push the project boundaries to that limit at this point.
Okay, so to be contemplated later.
Pretty much, yeah. The short version, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe, Chris, I could just add on just a little bit. The curb line actually does deviate here, which tends to pinch down the street too. And there is this turn lane. So we tended to stop it here as the interim concept, just because you would be able to continue up, but I think you'd have to do some more rechannelizing of the road. Just a note.
Yeah, I mean, when I looked at this slide previously and getting ready for this meeting, to me, it would make most sense, I think, for a cyclist that's planning on crossing that intersection to actually exit somewhere near the crosswalks at the bottom. But I'm not sure what that raised, like that seems to be a more visible place to try and cross over oncoming traffic. But anyway, so I thought maybe it was there and I just didn't see it, but it sounds like that just more thought is going to have to go into it at a different point in time, and that's fine.
Mayor, sorry, if maybe I could just jump in. I don't have my participant window up, so I couldn't raise my hand. My apologies.
Yeah.
It's a great question, Councillor McCollum, and it's certainly something that both Kyle Shaw and I identified when we looked at this. It is early days. We're also going to be embarking on hopefully a potential update to the site network plan. We know that 6th Street right now is a bikeway, and it's certainly something that we'll contemplate in that context, whether or not it stays a bikeway or it moves into a dedicated two-way bikeway and some sort of crossing for cyclists. So you're right on the mark in terms of identifying that this is very early conceptual, and there's some work to do there.
Great, thanks for that. Yeah, and just another question kind of along the same piece is that there's a $77,000 line item in the cost for approaches, and I just wanted to clarify, are we talking about these two areas that were in the slides, or are we talking about the approaches like the concrete work on either side of the bridge? Like how far out are we talking with that?
Sean, did you want to speak to that one?
Yeah, I'm actually trying to remember if we had grouped the pathways into, sorry, I'm trying to remember if the pathways were on the approaches. I thought they were. I have to just jump into my more detailed breakdown. We actually did have this separated.
I've got it pulled up here.
Okay.
The approaches section for 77,000 includes the concrete approach slab and the approach walls.
Okay, so that's what I was thinking. That was your question is, if I go to the network arch, like we kind of had this area as approaches. Yeah, okay. Thanks for that, Chris.
Yeah.
So it didn't include those two features, this raised crosswalk with the trail or the roundabout. Those are a separate line item. Sorry.
Excellent. And Councillor Morin.
Oh, thank you. I thought Councillor Theos was in front of me. Thanks so much for the presentation. I'm excited about the prospect of this. I also had a question about the width as well. As long as it didn't kind of take away from the, I guess, some of the comments that I've heard from folks is around keeping the bridge as not kind of intruding on the environment, and I'm happy that this particular design is the recommended one because I think it's the least intrusive and allows for the best integration into the natural environment. So I think as long as the width didn't kind of deter from that, I think having a bit more width could be a real benefit. Of course, I do really appreciate how this project satisfies many of our priorities, from active transportation to downtown enhancement, the parks and rec, the arts and culture piece. Like, it really ticks a lot of the boxes, and is obviously going to be an amazing focal point. Of course, I'm interested in the shopping list, and I may have something to add to the recommendation. And I know that it's a shopping list and some of these things can be considered later, but I do think that in terms of the public art possibility, that some early partnerships could be fruitful, especially in terms of accessing grant funding that maybe other groups may be eligible for. So I do have something to possibly add to the recommendation around that. Just overall, I think that it's a great report, and looking forward to going further. Thank you.
Excellent, thanks for that. And Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you very much for the presentation and report. This was really, really helpful to see some more meat on the bones of the project. And I'm also going to talk about the width of the bridge. That seems to be what's kind of focusing our attention at this point. And I found it interesting to note that the sort of the active transportation guidelines say 3.5, and we're going with 4. So that is something of an increase over the minimum. And I found it quite useful, actually, the references to the fact that the Central Valley Greenway and the North Shore Spirit Trail, which are both very highly used trails in the Lower Mainland, both use 4-meter wide bridges. So that's a standard which seems to work with fairly busy trails. And following on what Councillor McCollum was saying, I quickly Googled and couldn't find the width for that particular bridge, but I looked at pictures of that bridge, and it sure looks like about 4 meters to me. That would be just eyeballing it, the Selkirk Trestle. And I also thought it was useful, the reference to the fact that the Riverway Trail is 3 meters wide. So this would be 1/3 wider than that trail, which, and while I would, in a perfect world, like to have an even wider bridge with more space for people, 4 meters is seeming like it's a fairly reasonable compromise between level of service and cost. I guess this is leading to a question about the storm pipe that's running down 6th Street. There was mention that if the bridge was going wider than 4 meters, particularly it seemed if it was more than 5 meters, that there would be issues running into that storm pipe. And I guess since that's a factor to be considered with widening the bridge, just so we've considered that, I was wondering if you have a general sense of what that cost would be to address the storm pipe. And the second question would be whether we can be certain that we're not going to have issues with the storm pipe if we go with 4 meters. So yeah, thanks.
Great questions. Thank you very much. To answer your first question, no, we haven't developed a cost estimate to move or relocate or realign the storm pipe. I would estimate cost for that to be in the range of $100,000, maybe a little more. But I just want to be clear, we're still very much in the early stages of design. And so that's something that would really be developed through the detailed design phase once we got out there and develop some more detail around what exactly we would be doing.
Sorry, My second question was just, are we fairly confident that with the 4-meter width that we will avoid that storm pipe? Yeah,
oh,
thanks.
Sorry. My apologies. At this point, yes, but to echo the first answer, yeah, still to be determined during detailed design. We believe there's enough room up to 5.5. We should be pretty safe. Any further than that, we're starting to push it. But at this point, it's just an estimate. We'd really have to do some more work out there to know for sure.
Okay, thanks for the clarity, Chris. Appreciate that.
My pleasure.
And thanks for that. And Councillor Theos.
Thank you. By looking at the lighting that was in the report, I'm wondering with the lighting that was required for this particular bridge, being that in the wintertime as we're in now, and we can see that the days get shorter and we're looking at 4 o'clock even starting to get dark outside, and again, the conditions on the bridge such as that could become a little bit more wet, slippery. Do we feel there's adequate lighting for those type of conditions? And secondly, is there going to be a separation between the pedestrians and the cyclists, so they're just not in each other's pathway?
Great questions. Thank you very much. Yes, the base level of lighting provided for in the base level cost estimate, we do believe that is going to be adequate to meet all conditions. We feel it should be okay. Second question, separation between pedestrians and cyclists. At this point, no. With a 4-meter wide bridge, it would be mixed use on the bridge deck.
Thank you.
And Councillor Frischkin.
Yeah, thanks again, Mayor. So I did Google the width of the Selkirk trestle, and I found a guide that said it's 5 meters wide. That doesn't mean the deck's 5 meters wide though, so I'm not really sure. And I kind of wonder if it's worth putting off this decision to get a little more information, because it's hard to go back and add a meter to a bridge. But in general, I feel the same way. The cost, like $800 and some odd thousand. That's I think that's 20% more. So it's substantial. And if we can make do with a 4-meter wide bridge, I think that's a wise decision. So maybe a question to staff about timing on this decision. Could it wait for a little more information, or are we sort of need to keep going here?
Great question. Thank you. Sean, could you pull up the project schedule slide there, please? And thank you. To answer your question, the sooner the better on the decision. As you can see, we've got a very, very tight project schedule. And we've got a number of constraints. So the sooner we can lock in width, the better. If we could provide direction tonight, it would be greatly appreciated. Constraints include permitting, our detailed design, and then the borrowing process. And then we're really tied into these construction windows with the Eagle's Nest being out there. That's an incredible amount of uncertainty that we're still working to understand. So the sooner we can lock in a design and get that moving, I think the better the rest of the project's going to go.
All right.
I understand. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd certainly be in favor of us making the decision tonight and accepting the staff recommendation. I think we have to be mindful that any escalating cost is going to be significant. And it's my hope that we can raise the majority of the funding for this project through grants. I think we have other considerations, including how long the pandemic goes, what our tax revenue situation will be. And I'm just wondering from staff perspective, if we go ahead with the plan right now and we find that there isn't sufficient grant money available such that borrowing is going to compromise our ability to co-manage other projects, how locked in are we in terms of moving forward?
Excellent question, and a very complicated one. As I understand the question, if there's not a grant available within our identified window here in the project schedule, what are our options? I think it'll be a bit of a discussion at that point. Do we want to wait and hold out and see if we can get a better grant, or do we want to turn to alternate methods for fundraising, or do we want to leave it all up to borrowing? The grants out right now are a little restrictive in that they all require construction to be completed in 2021, which would be almost impossible for this project. That's why we're not applying for any grants at this point in time. We're somewhat confident there'll be some more grant money coming out next year, and it's usually in the July to September range. We're hopeful that we will have a good grant opportunity within that time frame. If that's not the case and we start sort of bumping into the borrowing process, then it may be a discussion as to how we proceed with the project going forward. So we'd probably be coming back to council at that point in time.
Thanks. And further to that, I know you've had discussions with a variety of stakeholders in the community. And I'm just wondering what your sense is of the willingness of those stakeholders to as was previously contemplated in the prior iterations of this idea, to actually raise money through the public and the community for a portion of the cost. What's your sense of the willingness of our stakeholders to step forward in that way?
Stakeholders are very supportive of that approach. I'm not sure if they'd be taking on much of the work to achieve that, but certainly supportive of that approach. There were a number of ideas suggested, which I won't go into now, but definitely an option that we're seriously looking at.
Thanks very much.
My pleasure.
And Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make just an observation or two about the cable stayed versus the network arch, and that's the other decision, I guess, besides width. And it seemed to be the cable stayed seemed to have a smaller construction footprint, so fewer trees and disturbance in Sims Park, less of an impact on business on the western side. And the incremental build means it's less complex, and it also has lower annual maintenance cost as compared to a network arch. And it also obviously impedes views up and down the river minimally. And one of the questions I had is one of the cautions about the cable stayed arch, the cable stayed bridge, was there were a limited number of contractors who were able to complete a project like that. And I'm just wondering if we know anything about the availability of those contractors. We obviously have a very tight time frame the way you're laying it out. And if there's only three operations who do it and they're all booked into 2023, then that would obviously be something we need to bear in mind. So I was just going to ask about that, and then I had a short follow-up after that.
Okay, great question. I don't believe we have looked into contractor availability for any of the bridge options. We're going to wait to see which option was selected and then really start chasing them down. Sean, do you have a sense on the availability of bridge building contractors at this point in time?
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the things we look at on these bridges is that, if it's really small, then it's hard to attract the right contractor. I think this has about the right size. Like it's a wide enough bridge with enough length that I think you're going to get quite an interest amongst the contractor community. The incremental build too, having the steel with the concrete deck, like it allows everything to be prefabricated and then shipped up, so they can assemble this pretty quick once they're ready. Placing the towers and building the back spans and then incrementally building out. And that was one of the considerations here, is to fit within that construction window. So it also works well with the contractors being on site for a limited amount of time. So yeah, I think we're pretty confident that you'd be able to find interest.
Well, that's great to hear. And The other question I had was just about one of the extras. I realize we're deciding on those later, but I just wanted to ask you quickly since you're both here. One of the questions was lighting on both sides. It's 137,500. I was just wondering if with a bridge of this width, with the lighting on both sides, would that be for safety, for aesthetics? Would lighting on one side be considered to be sufficient in terms of safety and other factors? One of you just explain a bit more about the option of second side lighting.
Sean, would you like to take that one, please?
Yeah, I can take that on. So at 4 meters, we felt that one side lighting would be able to give you a pretty good spread. They have some lenses on these linear light systems that do help spread the light across the deck. If you get into like the wider bridges, then I think you would need to adopt that second side lighting. One of the things we thought about too is like, you know, with bikes, you tend to have headlamps. So you are biking on a lot of trails in the night. So you kind of have your light with you. As a pedestrian, you can walk near the railing at night and you do get this nice coverage. So you can see ice, you can see debris or other obstacles. And so the second side lighting, we would say at a 4 meter is kind of a bonus, and it's a choice of what the criteria you want to adopt as far as facial recognition and things of that sort. So it needs to be discussed maybe a little bit more in the detailed design.
So that helps to clarify the degree to which it's optional rather than likely necessary. And it sounds like the narrower the bridge to 4 meter options, the more optional the second side lighting becomes. Okay, appreciate that. Thanks, Sean.
You're welcome.
Excellent. And Councillor Theos.
Appreciate it. This question, I'm not sure exactly who's going to answer it, but I'm going to put it out there and see who will field it. The sort of along the lines of what Councillor Hillian was asking about earlier, as in terms of projects that we have that we have in the books that we've actually had to postpone or defer to a later date as a result of the challenges that our community is facing through COVID and many other challenges within the past year or so that are just basically ones that that were not in our control. This project, if it was to move forward with that timeline, how does it affect other projects that we have in place that we were looking at moving forward on? Does this put other projects at the back of the bus, or even with grants, or is this going to be separate from that process?
Great question. Thank you very much. Trevor, would you be able to provide some comment on this?
Yeah, thank you. I'll pass this over to Jennifer, but my perspective is that detailed design and having detailed design of a project of this magnitude is critically important to access any grants, frankly, any community funding as well. I think it's very prudent step, like we do with all our projects, is move towards detailed design. That, of course, will also give us a Class A design or project cost. So then we'll really have a really good idea of the scope and the project costs. But in my opinion, detailed design is critically important because at this point, it's really kind of nebulous without that design. But I will pass this over to Jennifer Nelson, who could talk a little bit about the funding impacts and how that affects some of our other projects, which I think is a very good question.
Thank you through the CAO to Mayor and Council. So I can't speak from the operational perspective. That would be up to our directors in those various departments to determine in terms of capacity. So I would just be speaking more around the financial part of it. So if there was some detailed design amount put into the 2021 budget, we would have to look at all the funding sources, but off the top of my head, it would be mostly general revenue we would have to use to fund that design at this point. Maybe a combination of reserve. We haven't got the full plan together yet to see where all those projects are landing and look at all the funding sources. And of course, then it sounds like that's what will be required to seek out the grant opportunities, which we would have to have in place before we can start going to borrowing. And part of when we send our borrowing bylaws to the ministry, we have to identify what the other funding sources are. So generally not allowed to borrow 100% for something. So what I would say is that because we're not at the point where we have the full general capital and operating financial plans compiled, we're still working on that right now. I can't say how that will affect other projects in terms of funding at this point. And then of course, the operational side would be in terms of when the construction's happening, if that's going to affect any other projects that were in line to be done in that year. That would be Chris or Kyle, I guess, responding to that. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate it.
Excellent. And on the cost, and maybe I'm like, I recall, and again, it was quite a while ago, maybe 10 years ago, there was about, I think $75,000 was put towards a study for the previous pedestrian bridge plan. And so what would the cost be for just getting into that detailed design? I know we put, like, that was a totally different project, but would we be looking at a similar kind of price line, or would we be looking a little bit more?
Great question. We'd be looking at about $200,000 to complete detailed design in the upcoming year.
So if we got to detailed design, but then budgetarily, again, as people are talking about in terms of COVID and grants, if things don't quite line up, that detailed design would probably have a shelf life of a few years to kind of hopefully, if we can't get it done on this timeline, if it gets delayed a little bit to slot into funding and stuff, then there'd still be some value there, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. Detailed design would actually have a longer shelf life. Costs would have to be inflated proportionally with inflation. That would be the main consider, and then any permitting considerations that might have changed. But other than that, yeah, it'd be fine to sit and not proceed. We could look at other options, discuss funding sources, all of that.
Thanks for that. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, Mayor, I know we're on receipt, and I was going to ask if you wanted me to move the motion, but I see that Councillor Morin has her hand up, so I'll pull off.
All right, Councillor Morin.
Yeah, no, I wanted to, once we pass receipt, I'd like to move the motion with a slight addition, please. Thanks.
Do you want to speak to the addition now, or just wait?
Well, I can. I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't know what's the best way to go about it, but.
Well, if you want, I mean, it is just receipt. I'll accept that it's unanimous receipt unless somebody waves their hands furiously. Seeing none, if you'd like to make a motion, I'll pass it back to you. Or Councillor Hilling, did you want to speak beforehand, or?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I would find it helpful if Councillor Morin could share what her point is prior to the actual motion, and then we get some sense of whether it's something we can support or not, and we don't necessarily have to go through a complex amendment process. But other than that, I did want to just say that I know that we are hearing from people on a somewhat regular basis their concern about city finances in light of both the pandemic and other realities, and the taxpayers' ability to pay. And some people would feel that this is a project that is nice to have, and rather than something that we absolutely need to have. I think on the other side of that, we're looking at a project that would give a huge shot in the arm to our downtown and to our community as a whole, both from an aesthetic and from an economic standpoint. So if we look at it in terms of an investment, a long-lasting investment that will yield returns over many, many years. If we also look at the fact that it's often the case that in times of economic distress, the grant funding that is available helps to effectively prime the pump of economic activity. It creates jobs, and it creates a lift in spirits as well. So I think on those bases, we could make the argument that it's worth moving forward with this. As I stated earlier, it's certainly my hope that we can raise the majority of the funding without incurring a significant amount of additional borrowing. Thanks very much for that.
All right, thanks, Councillor Hillian, and back to you, Councillor Moore, if you wanted to speak to your thoughts.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, that very well said, Councillor Hillian. That's sort of the way that I was thinking about this as well. It may seem a bit frivolous to some, but I think, as I said earlier, I think this checks off many boxes, and I think the economic development piece can't be understated. Communities that have a vibrant kind of focal point in their city attract people for everything from picnics to walking uptown to spend money, and I guess, you know, having these spaces that are to be enjoyed without cost are so incredibly important to our folks that are low income, to go to the park, listen to a concert, you know, ride down on your bike. I think, you know, we need more of those public spaces, and I'm going to do the plug for the public art because, you know, art is inaccessible to many people when it's not in the public domain. And I think that public art is really important, and it's important to our well-being in many ways. And I do know a lot of folks in the arts community, and I know that there is support for partnerships, helping with fundraising, helping with grants. The other piece about the arts community is they're very connected to Comox First Nation, and they've done a lot of projects together. They have an incredible relationship, and I think there's some amazing opportunities to kind of marry those themes in terms of celebrating our First Nations culture, and some opportunities for maybe some interesting contemporary First Nations art that was actually shown in the report, some amazing designs. And I think that there's some opportunities for fundraising so that potential line item as an option may not end up being as costly because of those groups that would definitely, I think, help in that regard. So my proposed addition to the existing recommendation was to include just a sentence around staff consulting with the arts community and with Comox First Nation on design elements, and in particular the inclusion of public art, and on potential partnerships with grant funding. So just putting that intention in there to really have meaningful consultation with those groups to help with that aspect of the design.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments? It does sound like it's pretty much, there is the $200,000 already for public art. So this is really just reinforcing that communication side of things. Councillor Frisch?
Well, I was just going to show support for that amendment to the recommendation. Thanks.
Okay, and Councillor McCollum?
Thanks. I seem to be having many internet issues tonight. Just a question around these optional scope. We're not deciding on these items tonight. Am I understanding that correctly?
It's not required as part of the project. The main direction staff is looking for at this point is style of bridge and width of bridge.
And just so I understand the intent of Councillor Morin's amendment, is the desire to consult on this piece of the project with the kind of external art installations, or with the actual design of the structure?
Thank you. Well, it was more around the public potential public art piece, but I think yeah, I think the design in itself wouldn't necessarily need that consultation, but I guess I think it's important to have that early consultation about the public art option, because so that those groups can actually kind of get some momentum on knowing that this is a possibility, and that they can start to identify maybe grant sources that we're not eligible for, that they are eligible for. So that's why I wanted to include it as an additional recommendation to jumpstart that process and those conversations. As we know, they're not well funded, they're not well resourced. Comox First Nation has capacity issues. So I just think it's important, if we're considering this as an option, to make sure that those groups have the, have enough time to help support the project. And I know that definitely the arts community is very interested. Thanks.
Excellent. And Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, so I was just going to clarify that it is a little bit symbolic, but it's showing that our intentions are serious about finding a way to include art and First Nations art in particular into the project. So I'm in support of that, and obviously we'll have to visit the budget side of it when it comes up regularly planned.
Yeah, and we've got a long runway. I mean, if we were able to stick to this schedule, we're still kind of 2 years out, if I'm looking at it correctly, and so I think that gives us a lot of lead time. And again, we can start having those conversations now, and maybe even though this project is 2 years out, those conversations may spark some interest with public art for other projects in other instances. So I think it's certainly worthwhile to get that conversation started. And I think somebody used the term primed or something like that. So get things moving in that direction. So I'll give it back to you, Councillor Morin.
Yeah, I just wanted to say it doesn't commit us to doing it. It's on that list of optional, but I just think that it is important to have those conversations to flesh out what the support may be, what the other additional sources of funding might be, that kind of thing, and I guess just to have that that dialogue with those groups that I think are really important to the project. Thank you.
Excellent. Now, are you moving the motion now?
Yeah, I can move it. So do you want me to read out?
We're still on receipt, aren't we?
Oh, yes, we are.
I think actually I called the receipt for Councillor Morin, but then we continued the conversation kind of off the side of the table, I guess you'd say. But I don't think we've gone into any bad territories, but I do just want to, I'll give it back to you, Councillor Morin, if you'd like to move the actual motion with your amendment.
Sure. So I'll move that based on the December 7th, 2020 staff report, 6th Street Multi-Use Active Transportation Bridge Update, Council approve option 1 and direct 1, staff to include a line item in 2021 of the 2021 to 2025 financial plan to support design works with potential construction in 2022, subject to successful grant funding and borrowing in place. 2, staff to proceed with detailed design of a 4-meter wide symmetrical cable-stayed bridge as per the project schedule presented. 3, staff to commence public engagement to inform the public of the project. 4, staff to further review potential grant opportunities in 2021 with the goal of supporting construction in late 2022. And I would add 5, staff to consult with Comox Valley Arts and the Art Gallery staff and with Comox First Nation on design elements, in particular regarding the inclusion of public art and on potential partnerships with grant funding.
Second.
Happy second that.
Excellent. And I do just want to note, just because so that we do understand, and I think staff have contemplated it on page 60, it does say that communications have already started with Comox First Nation. So, and I think that is probably just on the construction side as well, considering the sensitive area being along the foreshore. Councillor Theos.
Thank you for the opportunity. And I wanted to say that there was a few points that I have. I agree that everything we can do to stimulate the economy, to try to enhance our downtown, makes a lot of sense. The fact that we just had the 5th Street project rehabilitation and recoding in front of us today at over $5 million project. That goes a long way in seeing that become a reality. Now, this is a second project that's in the $5 million range, and costs could be higher by the end of the day. Could be lower, but there is intimidation, in my opinion, that moving forward, the economy, from my perspective, and I'm not an analyst, but I would say that I worry that moving forward, we're going to have more challenges than we are at right now. I think the challenges are going to actually start occurring within the next 6 months to a year to 2 years down the road. So I think that's where we're going to start seeing a lot of our financial challenges, and the downtown businesses and businesses all throughout our community are going to be paying a large sum for these projects, with the 5th Street Bridge plus this potential 6th Street Bridge. The business community pays roughly 3.5 to 1 of what a residential homeowner would pay. So it is strenuous, in my opinion, to the businesses also. And for these reasons, I do have concerns and caution moving forward, and feel that we need to be in a very full and comprehensive communication with our constituents. The possibility of maybe during our mailouts for our tax notices, putting issues like this on that mail out to ask the residents, is this something that you could support right now? Is this something you have the ability to support right now? And I think that's going to be very important and critical moving forward. I do understand the importance of having the cost the cost estimation breakdowns and the detailed design that Trevor was referring to, in order for us to possibly succeed in receiving grants. And I understand that approach, and I'd be willing to see that approach move forward. But moving down the road, I believe that even with grants, that there are still going to be many hurdles for us to move forward economically and justify projects such as this.
All right, thanks for that. I don't see any further comments or questions at this point in time. We do have a motion on the table, and I just want to thank staff for really walking us through this process. Again, it's been a discussion that has had its ups and downs over the last 10 or 15 years, but I think that we're certainly on the right path right now. And again, we're not committing that we're any funds or anything to this today. We're really just saying, let's get the detailed design sorted out. Let's do that engagement. Again, staff have already started that engagement. They've already started talking to the BIA. So I think that, we have been fairly prudent. Obviously, we couldn't predict a pandemic. But as we move forward, again, hopefully we'll be able to find some of those grants that will be really targeted to this type of infrastructure creation. So with that, let's take the vote of council, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor, Mayor.
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCollum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
Favor.
And I'm in favor as well. Thanks for what was a very fulsome conversation. And again, to staff for keeping us really well informed, I think, on this project, so we're able to make the best decisions possible. So very much appreciated. With that, the next thing on the agenda is the public washrooms in downtown Courtenay. Sorry, my screen's bouncing around on me, but if somebody would like to move the...
I can do it. I got it here. Did somebody else have their hand up? No. I'll move that based on today's staff report entitled Public Washrooms in Downtown Courtenay, that council adopt option 1 and direct staff to proceed with direct engagement with the Downtown Courtenay Business Improvement Association to determine a preferable location for the installation of a public washroom within the downtown core based on the locations described herein, and that council direct staff to include a Portland Loo style public washroom facility in the draft 2021 financial plan for council consideration.
Second.
Excellent. I'll pass it over to Trevor Kushner.
Thank you, Mayor. I will pass this over to Kyle Shaw, the author of the report, our Director of Public Works Services, to summarize the report and take any questions that council may have.
Yes, thank you for that. Through the mayor or through the CAO to mayor and council, my apologies. The purpose of this report was to provide mayor and council with information, optional locations with a high level cost associated with providing a standalone washroom in the downtown core. With that, staff have identified a number of feasible options. First, of course, is the Portland Loo itself. The Portland Loo is an obvious choice as it meets the needs of the request, and they can be found providing effective service throughout cities across North America. The second and closer to home option is the Herbaloo. The Herbaloo is a similar product to the Portland Loo, that it is a standalone washroom, and the difference being that it is supplied and fabricated in the interior of BC and is a Canadian-made product. Some financial implications to consider relative to the two options. The overall project capital cost for Portland Loo is estimated between $190,000 and $220,000, and the cost for an Herbaloo washroom unit is between $172,000 and $186,000. These costs are inclusive of installation costs for both hydro, water, and wastewater utilities, and those are ranging in between, depending on the location of choice, between $33,000 and $47,000. It should also be noted that this project may meet the criteria for the newly released federal restart program, and staff will ensure that this potential is clarified in the 2021 general financial plan. Some other operational considerations would be the cost of servicing this particular unit in perpetuity. That is estimated that a building of this nature would require an annual maintenance cost of around $27,000 and would need to be included in the operational public works operations increase for servicing year over year. And finally, and probably the most important part of this, is noting that the overall process will be significant in terms of stakeholder engagement with the downtown core and the DCBI membership itself. And therefore, it's also noted that they will be included in the overall discovery process for identifying the specific location for the construction of this asset. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions that Mayor and Council may have.
All right, and starting with Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Again, another great report. I had a question about the quality of this BC alternative. It looks substantially different, but I wonder if staff have a sense at this point of whether there's like a difference in functionality or whatnot. I would note that the price is pretty much the same, and obviously we want to support local if possible, but is that something you need to look into, or do you already understand sort of the ins and outs of these washrooms?
Yeah, thank you for that. It's a great question. The washroom itself is really designed based on very similar attributes of the Portland Loo, utilizing many of the modern accommodations that have been built into the Portland Loo, and basically just refining that and making it a much more simpler product in terms of overall ability to build and then install. And relatively speaking, the price is a little bit less just because it is a Canadian product. Most of the parts and services can be fabricated in-house, and it's supplied as you see it depicted in Appendix C of the report.
Well, I imagine there's significant transportation savings to getting it from BC. I know crossing the border is never easy for products, so I'm confident leaving it in your hands. Thanks.
Thanks for that. And we have Councillor Gillian.
Thanks very much, Mayor, and thanks so much to staff for the research and the work that's gone into this excellent report. A couple of questions. First of all, regarding location, I think it's an excellent idea to consult with the downtown business people. I'm just wondering, though, if the area of the Sid Williams Theatre was, and particularly the Fountain Square, was considered as a possible location, and if it was rejected for any particular reason.
Thank you for that question. That area was not particularly identified within our research just because of the existing washroom that is available for public use at the plaza. So that washroom would stay in service and is still provided on a daily basis from dawn to dusk.
Okay, makes sense. The other question, I'm wondering if you see any possibility that we could generate some revenue through selling advertising on a building like this.
It's again a great point. Hadn't considered it, but as you note, and as you probably noticed, that the Herbaloo is actually a wrapped product, and it can be done in many of colors. And you're right, it probably could be advertisement that goes along with it. Interchangeable advertisement is definitely a possibility and something that staff could consider looking into.
Thanks. And the final question, I'm assuming that staff are looking for final details on whether this this could be covered entirely from the new grant money that we've received from the province related to COVID-19. As we know, we spent considerable money making a public washroom available to people who needed it during the pandemic shutdowns, and that was a vital service. So I'm just wondering what the status is of our inquiries and confirming that this would be eligible for full funding.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's another great question. If I may, I would defer this to Director Nelson.
Yeah, so through the CAO to Mayor and Council, we haven't sent a note directly relating to this, but from what I can tell, we can use those funds for supporting what they say vulnerable persons. And I think there's a good argument in this report that having these washrooms would support that, and we would be able to use those funds towards this project.
Excellent. Thanks very much.
And Councillor McCollum.
Thank you. Thank you very much to staff for this report. It was great to see it coming back to our agenda, and I found the information in it to be very useful, especially the photos with potential sites and just kind of ballpark of what that would look like in various places around our downtown. I'm very much in support of us making an investment into better public access to washroom facilities downtown. I had a question about just understanding the additional maintenance costs. Is that mostly based on the requirement to have like regular cleaning of a new facility? Is that the bulk of it?
Yeah, it's exactly that. The bulk of that cost is with respect to visits to the location on a multitude of occasions at any given day, depending on the amount of time that particular location would be open to public use. So the estimations that we had made were based on a dawn to dusk scenario. So that number would alter if we were to leave that facility open 24 hours a day. And we based that information not only based on our known values relative to those services that we provide currently, but also based on our conversation with the Portland Blue subject matter experts in terms of what they're experiencing with those particular facilities across North America.
Great. Yeah, I mean, from what we know, obviously the long-term maintenance costs are really a more significant impact to the city than the investment in the actual structure itself. But I think this is money well spent, no matter how we look at it. We've heard continuously from downtown businesses what an impact there is from not having a 24-hour washroom facility downtown for people experiencing homelessness. So I mean, this is an issue that needs attention. And further, I've heard from various community support groups what an issue it was for that same population to access just water when we shut down earlier. And I can't see that isn't still an issue after hours. I mean, we have few places where water is available once our washrooms are locked. And from what I understand with these facilities, that would also kind of resolve both those issues. So, and also not only is it, an issue after hours, but during the day, businesses are basically providing this service in many ways, and having another option, not just for our vulnerable populations, but simply for visitors to downtown. When I visited Nelson this summer, there's one that looks quite nice right on their main street, which is, a busy thoroughfare, and it's being regularly used by visitors downtown, and it looks good. It holds up well to the amount of traffic, and I think it would serve everybody in our community. So I'm happy to see this coming forward. Oh, and I wanted to make one other suggestion. I personally see some benefit to either of the England locations that were listed as options, although I'm not sure if these options are in order of preference or recommended by staff, but I think the one that's up from the library could be a great location. Currently, we don't really think of that intersection as being very central downtown, but at some point in the next, or hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll see that old Thrifty site as a hub, and it is like a thoroughfare in terms of pedestrian traffic, and also when there's a commercial business there, I think it is probably more central than the other than the option one, and I think it's important for it to be in a visible location. So I am a bit concerned that having it tucked in that parking lot off 5th Street may not be as well used as it could be in the places a little further up 5th. So just wanted to make that comment. Thanks.
Excellent, thanks for that. And Councillor Theos.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, no, I believe that bathroom of some type for use of the public in the downtown area, it does make a lot of sense. The questions I have, I'll try not to offer too many at once, but the first question will be in regards to, do you feel that there's a better chance of getting a grant if it's a BC or Canadian company rather than outside of the province or Canada for the grant purposes? Secondly, my question is in regards to the prevention of vandalism and the concerns of vandalism of facilities such as this. And the third would be in line of
Councillor Theos, just so we'll let staff answer, and then you can ask the next question, just so that they get an opportunity to answer.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. For the first one, in terms of grant application and whether one American or Canadian product would differ in terms of the application received, I don't believe that would play a critical role in the review process. I think it's more importantly as to what services it will provide and whether or not they meet the benchmarks of the application or the criteria for that. And the second question that you had there about graffiti or vandalism, both the Portland Loo and the Urbaloo are supplied with anti-graffiti coatings. One of them is in the form of a wrap, and the other one is in terms of the outside sheeting product itself. And then in the interior of these, they're all vandal-proof, stainless steel format, stainless steel toilets, dispensers, all of those appurtenances that go along with it, so that they're in the best way possible, providing the service that's required of them for the longest period of time while they're in service.
Thanks for those answers, and I appreciate it very much. And the other question I would have, if I may, please, is just in regards to, I know there was outside bathroom that was at the air park, and I don't know if it was relocated or if it was taken out, but I don't see it at that same location close to where the kids park was. But my question would also be in lines of the just as in terms of the $27,000 in the annual maintenance and supplies. During this COVID time, we have seen another bathroom use at a much higher cost so on a daily basis. Now, has that changed as COVID has moved forward? Or, because I remember those costs were in the hundreds of dollars a day for that particular bathroom. What's different about this particular one?
Yeah, thank you for that. Maybe I'll speak to the first question in terms of the proximity to the washroom at the air park. That washroom still exists. There's actually 2 porta potties that are established there. They've just been moved out of the direct sight line and moved adjacent to the parking facility. So they're a lot more user-friendly in terms of access and egress, but still within close proximity to the tot lot that they were formerly kind of in front of. So they're still there. We still provide those services. And the second question, to expenses, you will recall that while we were providing services during the onset of COVID, it was the majority of those costs of services were relative security that was being provided on a while they were open basis, and that was the majority of the cost relative to providing that in the midst of COVID.
And thank you. And you don't see this being the same situation where we may have to have security at some point to ensure people are using it for the right reasons and purposes?
Yeah, and I guess the answer to that question would be depending on how or whether or not council chooses to have this service as a 24-hour service, or is similar to the service that we currently provide for all of our facilities, which is a dawn to dusk in terms of lockup. There are particular attributes of these assets that deter that type of usage, given the slotted sight lines on the side. So as an RCMP member or a general member of the public is driving by, they can see whether or not there's activity within. They also have blue lighting that deters a misuse in that particular perspective. And then interior wise within the facilities themselves, there's not a lot that's accessible. Many of the hand washing stations are actually, and the water fountain stations, which are optional, are on the outside of the facilities. You actually have to leave it to finish and then move on.
Thank you for all those answers.
You're welcome.
Excellent. And Councillor Morin.
Great, thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Hillian for initially bringing up this idea. I think it's great to see this report come forward. I think it's really timely with all that's been going on, and some restrictions on accessibility to bathrooms and places for sanitary conditions. So. And of course, I've been hearing from people, especially with the second wave of COVID, asking for more washrooms and places to wash hands and all that kind of stuff. So I think we're still definitely in that place of needing this. I just wanted to bring up a couple of things. There was, I know that I'd received a call from someone from Rotary quite a few months ago saying that they were potentially interested in helping to fund something like this as one of their projects. So that was my first question, whether there's been any conversation with Rotary or if Rotary had contacted any staff about this. And then I've got a couple more. Thanks.
Yes, thank you for that. To date, staff is not aware of any contact being made with respect to the Rotary Club or funding sources relative to joint project delivery. Certainly worth investigating, and I thank you for bringing that to my attention.
And I'm pretty sure it's something that came up in my Rotary Club, but Councillor Hillian, you got your hand up, so maybe you want to just jump in and just update. Or were you waiting until after Councilor Morin?
Yeah, I'll wait for Councilor Morin. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay. Back to you, Councilor Morin.
Yeah, just a couple other things. Just regarding some of the extras with this. First of all, I thought that Sharps containers were provided by Island Health, so I didn't think that that would be a cost that we would have to incur. So that was one thing. And then regarding the hand wash with dryer option, which is pretty pricey, I'm assuming that if we didn't have that, we would still have hand sanitizer and another aspect for sanitary conditions. So does staff have some information on those two items? Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. They are depicted as add-ons within the build process for a Portland glue. However, those particular two products, which would be the hand dryer and the Sharps container, are inclusive of the Herbaloo product.
Okay, I see. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And I think just regarding, I mean, these are touted to be quite, I think, vandalism proof, and also, as mentioned, do incorporate features that help with safety. So I think they're good options and have had good success in other areas. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Councilor Morin. And Councilor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. It is correct that we did have a representative of one of the Rotary clubs who initially was very interested in supporting this project. I don't know that anything formal has been done, and if in fact it is eligible for the money that we're receiving from the province, then I think we might better direct groups like Rotary to support the new proposed bridge instead. The other thing I might mention is that I'm curious what the implementation schedule might be for this. I note that the recommendation is that we include this in the 2021 financial plan, but I am wondering if we in fact can pay for it through that grant funding, whether we can do it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's kind of a two-parter for me operationally in terms of delivery for this project. I do know that the Portland glue is something that you need to, if you're considering that particular option in terms of service, that there's a particularly long lead time on those particular appurtenances. So we have to put an order in and then see where it schedules out in terms of fabrication. Now, we were very well aware in terms of fabrication delays were relative to a lot of particular things, including vehicles and such are delayed because of COVID. So those updates from the factory would be part of that inquiry process relative to the RFQ. We would seek out that specific information through that process for them to identify timelines, and that would also create a weighting scale for them in terms of which product that we may choose from a delivery perspective. In terms of the financial question, again, I would defer to Director Nelson or Mr. Christian has his hand up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Great question. I think if it was a regular budgetary item, as Mr. Shaw stated, it would probably be approved in sometime in April or May, and then construction would ensue around early summer and be in service. Depending on the order time of that Portland glue would probably be around August, September. That said, I think it's a great point. We will be reaching out. Staff will be reaching out to the auditors of this money and grants, and we're going to be getting that information back in early January. If in fact it is determined that we can utilize those funds, I see no reason why we wouldn't bring a staff report to council or middle to late January to allocate some of those funds and proceed with that project immediately.
That would be great. And as far as the design and the brand and such, I'd certainly be happy with taking the recommendations of the downtown business people because the aesthetics of this will certainly have impact from their perspective, and I think they're well positioned to comment on that. If the two brands are of equal quality, or if one's available sooner than the other, those would be considerations as well. Thanks very much.
Excellent. And I think we had a pretty fulsome conversation. Thanks again for staff for, again, bringing this back to us to contemplate. And so with that, I'll take council's vote, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCollum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
I'm in favor.
And I'm in favor as well. Excellent. After that, next is reports and updates from council members. And I had a couple things, but did any of the councilors want to give an update for anything that's happened in the last couple of weeks? I think it's been potentially a little bit slow. There hasn't been a whole bunch of events, but Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. Contrary to what you just said, there may not be a lot of events, but the meetings and such continue on unabated. I just would like to acknowledge that I believe most of us took part in the community to community forum organized by Comox First Nation on the 27th of November, along with other elected officials and staff members from throughout the community. And it was an excellent event with presentations from Jesse Morin, the archaeologist, who regarding the archaeological policy that the First Nation is working on, as well as on the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People legislation that's been passed to the provincial government. And we had an excellent presentation on the impact of that, which I think went a long way to both increasing our understanding of the process and affirming the path that we've been on with endorsing the UN resolution in our own official community plan and ongoing work with KFN. So thanks for the opportunity to take part in that.
Fantastic. Thanks, Councillor Hillian. And we also took the opportunity for the city and council to recommit our support to KFN in their endeavors, and if there's ways that we're able to support them for bringing that message that we all received to the public, that's something that we're certainly still interested to help facilitate in some way, even though obviously with COVID it's a bit more limited now, but we're really looking for any of those opportunities. Any other councillors have anything that they'd like to add? Yeah, I'm always blown away. I love listening to Jesse Morin. He's great at talking, and obviously must have been raised well. But with that, one of the other things that I just thought I would mention, and I brought this up a few weeks ago, I believe, and that was I had brought an idea to the federal government regarding waiving the taxable benefit for gift cards for companies and organizations that would normally host a Christmas party, and they're able to provide up to $150 in meals for an event. Because events are all canceled, those have all been basically changed to gift cards. And so my request to the government was to make those gift cards non-taxable as not a taxable part of their income. I thought it was a win-win-win in terms of really helping companies create a way to recognize their employees, really supporting local businesses, local restaurants, as well as obviously the employees themselves being able to benefit without getting taxed on it. And our MP Gord Johns did bring that to the floor yesterday on our behalf, which I was glad to hear. But unfortunately, the government did vote it down, unfortunately. But just the fact that that was brought forward, and I think ideas like that to look for the opportunities where we can really look to support our local businesses, look to support the workers who have been obviously really impacted this year. Obviously it's Christmas time, so it's trying to provide just a little bit more sunshine for folks right now in a difficult time. So I just want to thank Gord Johns for taking that forward. And with that, if there's nothing else, we'll move into resolutions of council. Councillor Hillian.
Well, thank you, Mayor. On my agenda, I have the schedule of acting mayors, but it's not specified, and I'm just wondering if your intent is that that be dealt with at another time, or if you're wanting the names to be filled in now, or how you want to handle that.
I think we were going to add those names now, and so I can give you the list that was on here that, give me 1 second, got to be in here somewhere. Outlook is always, for some reason, harder to find things. There we go. Here it is. So the way that it was is basically January and July would be Councillor Morin, and February and August was Councillor McCullum. And just give me 1 second. March and September were Councillor Hillian. And of course, every time I change my screen, everything vanishes. April to October was Councillor Cole Hamilton. May and June, well, May and November would be Councillor Theos, and June and December would also be Councillor Theos.
I'll move that resolution, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks very much.
Second.
Excellent. And I'll poll council unless there's any discussion, and I don't see any discussion, I don't believe. Starting with Councillor Cole Hamilton.
In favor.
Councillor Frisch.
In favor.
Councillor Hillian.
In favor.
Councillor McCullum.
In favor.
Councillor Morin.
In favor.
Councillor Theos.
In favor.
And I'm in favor as well. Thanks for that. And now we've got a rise and report for land acquisition.
I'll move that we rise and report.
All right.
Second.
All right. Thanks very much. And I'll pass it over to Trevor Kushner.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I pass this over to Kyle Shaw, the Director of Public Works, to talk a little bit about the advantages to Public Works and how this makes our Public Works facility so much better, I'd like to acknowledge the hard work that's gone into this particular file, and in fact the employees that played a key role. And one of them was on the call earlier today. That's Renata Wickia, and then of course our corporate officer Wendy Sarista, who put together the documentation in very short order to satisfy the very tight timelines to acquire this property. I would, however, like to acknowledge one employee who, going back to 2018, who played a vital role, in fact, in acquiring this property, and that's our manager of asset management, Rod Armstrong. He not only identified the fact that by simply looking out his window that TELUS was starting to evacuate the site, he also made contact with TELUS and their land manager, and frankly was quite dogged in his determination to acquire the opportunity to acquire the site. And this, of course, was even through COVID, in the face of COVID. And I just like to acknowledge that there were a lot of hard work went into that, and I know that Mr. Armstrong deserves that acknowledgement. But with that, I'll pass it over to Kyle Shaw.
Thank you for that. Through the CAO, the Mayor and Council. Yeah, it's a great asset. It's a great addition to the Public Works Yard, as Mr. Kushner alluded to. And I would echo many of his thoughts with respect to Mr. Armstrong. We are very lucky here at Public Works to have staff that have a significant history within our community and within our Public Works Department, to have those relationships, to know those individuals, to be able to embark on those conversations and bring great things such as this to fruition. So I echo that. This is a great addition to the Public Works Services Yard, being proximity right next to us. There's a couple particular outbuildings there that will be useful, as well as the land in terms of space is vitally important to our growing operation. This will enable and help Public Works Services, specifically the Civic Properties Division, enabling them from moving from the Grant Avenue property and finding a new home back here at Public Works Services, which will free up that particular property in terms of consideration for future use. So again, It's a great addition. It's just in the infancy. It's like a giant Christmas present for most of the public works staff, and it's hard to keep them outside the fence. But we're going to do our appropriate research in terms of what that property needs before we can move in fully and do our appropriate assessments. But we look forward to the opportunities that exist with that being a part of our overall yard. So thank you.
Excuse me, we're losing the audio.
Yeah, Mr. Shaw, for some reason, about halfway through, it just got really, really quiet, so.
Oh, my apologies. I'll speak louder. Can you hear me now?
Yep, yeah, it just seemed to trail off just a little bit there, so I don't know if you turned your head a little bit or, but if you use your outside voice, I'm sure it'll be totally fine.
Use my outside voice. That's great. Yeah, and again, I don't know where I trailed off, but I really wanted to echo many of the thoughts that Mr. Kushner had relative to our particular work group, and I was just highlighting the fact that the individuals that we have here, longstanding individuals in the organization, have key relationships with our community and with TELUS and with Hydro and many other facets of the work that's done around us. And so this particular asset will be significant in terms of the overall operations, our growing operations, our continued to grow operations. In addition to that, it will enable our Civic Properties Division of Public Works Services to vacate the Grant Avenue property and bring them back home to Public Works for future growth in terms of that particular division, so we can better serve our community and then put that particular property into consideration for future use for council and their consideration. And again, a great opportunity for us, and we're very thankful to have it. And I was making in light at the very end there, it's just a bit of an early Christmas present for staff, and it's a bit hard to keep them outside the fence until we finish all of our reviews relative to the property and the risks that it may have. But we're very much looking forward to taking full advantage of it in the new year. Thank you.
Great to hear. Thanks so much, Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to note for anybody who's watching, it wasn't actually specified that what we're talking about is the former TELUS property at 1060, 1080, and 1090 Piercy Avenue. And I believe we've acquired this land at a pretty reasonable price, and we're dealing with it through existing budget and reserves, which seems quite prudent from a financial perspective. I'd like to just acknowledge our Public Works Department for all the amazing work that they do keeping the city running, and particularly I appreciate their response to issues that come up from citizens. I know that they have many demands on their time, but I'm always impressed with their ability to respond and the excellent work they do on our behalf. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian, and I think Council really echoes your thoughts here, so thanks for that. Seeing no further questions or comments, I'll poll Council, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor?
Councillor Frisch?
In favor?
Councillor Hillian?
In favor.
Councillor McCullum?
In favor.
Councillor Morin?
In favor.
Councillor Theos?
In favor.
And I'm in favor as well. I almost said Councillor Wells, but that's not it. There was no unfinished business, no notice of motions, and so into bylaws.
This one, Mayor. I'll move that City of Courtenay Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw number 3023-2020, a bylaw to amend City of Courtenay Fees and Charges Bylaw number 1673-1992 to amend the sewer utility user rates for 2021, received first, second, and third reading.
Excellent. Any questions or comments regarding that? Seeing none, polling Council, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
In favor?
Councillor Frisch?
In favor?
Councillor Hillian?
In favor.
Councillor McCullum?
In favor.
Councillor Morin?
In favor.
Councillor Theos?
In favor.
And I'm in favor as well. And for final adoption?
We'll move that the Fifth Street Bridge Rehabilitation Loan Authorization Bylaw number 2978-2020 be finally adopted.
Seconded.
Excellent. And I'll poll Council if there's no questions or comments, starting with Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
Yeah.
Councillor Frisch?
In favor.
Councillor Hillian?
In favor.
Councillor McCullum?
In favor.
Councillor Morin?
In favor.
Councillor Theos?
In support.
And I'm in support as well. Excellent. So yeah, only one thing left.
Move adjournment.
Second.
Okay, I think we got a second there as well, and I'll assume everybody is in agreement unless somebody waves their hands fiercely in opposition. And with that, thanks everybody for a good council meeting. I think we had a great discussion tonight and lots of various projects. Again, I think it's worth acknowledging that there's a lot going on still. Staff are busy beetling away on many different projects, so I just want to appreciate how hard they worked this year, especially in the midst of COVID and other things. So much appreciated. And with that, bye everybody.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks, Doug, for that sponsorship.